Rose Sue Jordan, Without Wood. I used to believe everything my mother said, even when I didn't know what she meant. Once when I was little, she told me she knew it would rain because lost ghosts were circling near our window, calling woo woo to be let in. She said doors would unlock themselves in the middle of the night unless we checked twice. She said a mirror could see only my face, but she could see me inside out even when I was not in the room. And all these things seemed true to me. The power of her words was that strong. She said that if I listened to her, later I would know what she knew, where true words came from, always from up high, above everything else. And if I didn't listen to her, she said my ear would bend too easily to other people, all saying words that had no lasting meaning because they came from the bottom of their hearts, where their own desires lived, a place where I could not belong. The words my mother spoke did come from up high. As I recall, I was always looking up at her face as I lay on my pillow. In those days, my sisters and I all slept in the same double bed. Janice, my oldest sister, had an allergy that made one nostril sing like a bird at night, so we called her Whistling Nose. Ruth was Uglyfoot, because she could spread her toes out in the shape of a witch's claw. I was Scaredy Eyes, because I would squeeze shut my eyes so I wouldn't have to see the dark, which Janice and Ruth said was a dumb thing to do. During those early years, I was the last to fall asleep. I clung to the bed, refusing to leave this world for dreams. "Your sisters have already gone to see old Mr. Chow," my mother would whisper in Chinese. According to my mother, old Mr. Chow was the guardian of a door that opened into dreams. "Are you ready to go see old Mr. Chow too?" And every night, I would shake my head. "Old Mr. Chow takes me to bad places," I cried. Old Mr. Chow took my sisters to sleep. They never remembered anything from the night before. But old Mr. Chow would swing the door wide open for me, and as I tried to walk in, he would slam it fast, hoping to squash me like a fly. That's why I would always dart back into wakefulness. But eventually old Mr. Chow would get tired and leave the door unwatched. The bed would grow heavy at the top and slowly tilt, and I would slide head first in through old Mr. Chow's door and land in the house without doors or windows. I remember one time, I dreamt of falling through a hole in old Mr. Chow's floor. I found myself in a nighttime garden, and old Mr. Chow was shouting, "Who's in my backyard?" I ran away. Soon I found myself stomping on plants with veins of blood, running through fields of snapdragons that changed colors like stoplights, until I came to a giant playground filled with row after row of square sandboxes. In each sandbox was a new doll, and my mother, who was not there but could see me inside out, told old Mr. Chow she knew which doll I would pick. So I decided to pick one that was entirely different. "Stop her! Stop her!" cried my mother. As I tried to run away, old Mr. Chow chased me, shouting, "See what happens when you don't listen to your mother." And I became paralyzed, too scared to move in any direction. The next morning I told my mother what happened, and she laughed and said, "Don't pay attention to old Mr. Chow. He is only a dream. You only have to listen to me." And I cried, "But old Mr. Chow listens to you, too." More than 30 years later, my mother was still trying to make me listen. A month after I told her that Ted and I were getting a divorce, I met her at church, at the funeral of China Mary, a wonderful 92-year-old woman who had played godmother to every child who passed through the doors of the First Chinese Baptist Church. "You are getting too thin," my mother said in her pained voice when I sat down next to her. "You must eat more." "I'm fine," I said, and I smiled for proof. "And besides, wasn't it you who said my clothes were always too tight?" "Eat more," she insisted. And then she nudged me with a little spiral-bound book hand-titled Cooking the Chinese Way by China Mary Chen. They were selling them at the door, only $5 each, to raise money for the Refugee Scholarship Fund. The organ music stopped, and the minister cleared his throat. He was not the regular pastor. I recognized him as Wing, a boy who used to steal baseball cards with my brother Luke. Only later, Wing went to divinity school, thanks to China Mary, and Luke went to the county jail for selling stolen car stereos. I can still hear her voice, Wing said to the mourners. She said God made me with all the right ingredients, so it'd be a shame if I burned in hell. Already cremated, my mother whispered matter-of-factly, nodding toward the altar, where a framed color photo of China Mary stood. I held my finger to my lips the way librarians do, but she didn't get it. That one, we bought it. She was pointing to a large spray of yellow chrysanthemums and red roses. $34, all artificial, so it will last forever. You can pay me later. Janice and Matthew also chip in some. You have money? Yes. Ted sent me a check. Then the minister asked everyone to bow in prayer. My mother was quiet at last, dabbing her nose with Kleenex while the minister talked. I can just see her now, wowing the angels with her Chinese cooking and gung-ho attitude. And when heads lifted, everyone rose to sing hymn number 335, China Mary's favorite. You can be an angel every day on earth. But my mother was not singing. She was staring at me. Why does he send you a check? I kept looking at the hymnal, singing. Sending rays of sunshine, full of joy from birth. And so she grimly answered her own question. He is doing monkey business with someone else. Monkey business? Ted? I wanted to laugh. Her choice of words, but also the idea. Cool, silent, hairless Ted, whose breathing pattern didn't alter one bit in the height of passion. I could just see him, grunting, ooh, 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 while scratching his armpits, then bouncing and shrieking across the mattress trying to grab a breast. No, I don't think so, I said. Why not? I don't think we should talk about Ted now, not here. Why can you talk about this with a psychiatric and not with Mother? Psychiatrist. Psychiatrics. She corrected herself. A mother is best. A mother knows what is inside you, she said above the singing voices. A psychiatrix will only make you huli-hoodoo, make you see hey mong mong. Back home, I thought about what she said, and it was true. Lately, I had been feeling huli-hoodoo, and everything around me seemed to be hey mong mong. These were words I had never thought about in English terms. I suppose the closest in meaning would be confused and dark fog. But really, the words mean much more than that. Maybe they can't be easily translated because they refer to a sensation that only Chinese people have, as if you were falling headfirst through old Mr. Chow's door, then trying to find your way back. But you're so scared you can't open your eyes, so you get on your hands and knees and grope in the dark, listening for voices to tell you which way to go. I had been talking to too many people, my friend, everybody it seems, except Ted. To each person, I told a different story. Yet, each version was true. I was certain of it, at least at the moment that I told it. To my friend Waverly, I said I never knew how much I loved Ted until I saw how much he could hurt me. I felt such pain, literally a physical pain, as if someone had torn off both my arms without anesthesia, without sewing me back up. Have you ever had them torn off with anesthesia? God, I've never seen you so hysterical, said Waverly. You want my opinion, you're better off without him. It hurts only because it's taken you 15 years to see what an emotional wimp he is. Listen, I know what it feels like. To my friend Lena, I said I was better off without Ted. After the initial shock, I realized I didn't miss him at all. I just missed the way I felt when I was with him. Which was what? Lena gasped. You were depressed. You were manipulated into thinking you were nothing next to him, and now you think you're nothing without him. If I were you, I get the name of a good lawyer and go for everything you can. Get even. I told my psychiatrist I was obsessed with revenge. I dreamt of calling Ted up and inviting him to dinner to one of those trendy who's who places like Cafe Majestic or Rosalie's. And after he started the first course and was nice and relaxed, I would say, "It's not that easy, Ted." From my purse, I would take out a voodoo doll which Lena had already lent me from her props department. I would aim my escargot fork at a strategic spot on the voodoo doll and I would say out loud in front of all the fashionable restaurant patrons, "Ted, you're just such an impotent bastard, and I'm going to make sure you stay that way." Wham! Saying this, I felt I had raced to the top of a big turning point in my life, a new me after just 2 weeks of psychotherapy. But my psychiatrist just looked bored, his hand still propped under his chin. "It seems you've been experiencing some very powerful feelings," he said, sleepy-eyed. "I think we should, think about them more next week." And so I didn't know what to think anymore. For the next few weeks, I inventoried my life, going from room to room, trying to remember the history of everything in the house, things I had collected before I met Ted. The hand-blown glasses, the macrame wall hangings, and the rocker I had recaned. Things we bought together right after we were married, most of the big furniture. Things people gave us, the glass-domed clock that no longer worked, 3 sake sets, 4 teapots. Things he picked out, the signed lithographs, none of them beyond number 25 in a series of 250, the Steuben crystal strawberries, and things I picked out because I couldn't bear to see them left behind. The mismatched candlestick holders from garage sales, an antique quilt with a hole in it, odd-shaped vials that once contained ointments, spices, and perfumes. I had started to inventory the bookshelves when I got a letter from Ted, a note, actually, written hurriedly in ballpoint on his prescription notepad. Signed for X where indicated, it read, and then in fountain pen blue ink, enclosed, check, to tide you over until settlement. The note was clipped to our divorce papers, along with a check for $10,000, signed in the same fountain pen blue ink on the note, and instead of being grateful, I was hurt. Why had he sent the check with the papers? Why the 2 different pens? Was the check an afterthought? How long had he sat in his office, determining how much money was enough? And why had he chosen to sign it with that pen? I still remember the look on his face last year when he carefully undid the gold foil wrap. The surprise in his eyes as he slowly examined every angle of the pen by the light of the Christmas tree. He kissed my forehead. "I'll use it only to sign important things," he had promised me. Remembering that, holding the check, all I could do was sit on the edge of the couch, feeling my head getting heavy at the top. I stared at the X's on the divorce papers, the wording on the prescription notepad, the 2 colors of ink, the date of the check, the careful way in which he wrote, 10,000 only and no cents. I sat there quietly, trying to listen to my heart, to make the right decision. But then I realized I didn't know what the choices were, and so I put the papers and the check away, in a drawer where I kept store coupons which I never threw away and which I never used either. My mother once told me why I was so confused all the time. She said I was without wood, born without wood so that I listened to too many people. She knew this because once she had almost become this way. "A girl is like a young tree," she said. "You must stand tall and listen to your mother standing next to you. That is the only way to grow strong and straight. But if you bend to listen to other people, you will grow crooked and weak. You will fall to the ground with the first strong wind, and then you will be like a weed, growing wild in any direction, running along the ground until someone pulls you out and throws you away." But by the time she told me this, it was too late. I had already begun to bend. I had started going to school, where a teacher named Mrs. Barry lined us up and marched us in and out of rooms, up and down hallways while she called out, "Boys and girls, follow me!" And if you didn't listen to her, she would make you bend over and whack you with a yardstick 10 times. I still listened to my mother, but I also learned how to let her words blow through me. And sometimes I filled my mind with other people's thoughts, all in English, so that when she looked at me inside out, she would be confused by what she saw. Over the years, I learned to choose from the best opinions. Chinese people had Chinese opinions. American people had American opinions. And in almost every case, the American version was much better. It was only later that I discovered there was a serious flaw with the American version. There were too many choices, so it was easy to get confused and pick the wrong thing. That's how I felt about my situation with Ted. There was so much to think about, so much to decide. Each decision meant a turn in another direction. The check, for example. I wondered if Ted was really trying to trick me, to get me to admit that I was giving up, that I wouldn't fight the divorce, and if I cashed it, he might later say the amount was the whole settlement. Then I got a little sentimental and imagined, only for a moment, that he had sent me $10,000 because he truly loved me. He was telling me, in his own way, how much I meant to him, until I realized that $10,000 was nothing to him, that I was nothing to him. I thought about putting an end to this torture and signing the divorce papers, and I was just about to take the papers out of the coupon drawer when I remembered the house. I thought to myself, I love this house. The big oak door that opens into a foyer filled with stained glass windows, the sunlight in the breakfast room, the south view of the city from the front parlor, the herb and flower garden Ted had planted. He used to work in the garden every weekend, kneeling on a green rubber pad, obsessively inspecting every leaf, as if he were manicuring fingernails. He assigned plants to certain planter boxes. Tulips could not be mixed with perennials. A cutting of aloe vera that Lena gave me did not belong anywhere because we had no other succulents. I looked out the window and saw the calla lilies had fallen and turned brown. The daisies had been crushed down by their own weight, the lettuce gone to seed. Runner weeds were growing between the flagstone walkways that wound between the planter boxes. The whole thing had grown wild from months of neglect. And seeing the garden in this forgotten condition reminded me of something I once read in a fortune cookie. When a husband stops paying attention to the garden, he's thinking of pulling up roots. When was the last time Ted pruned the rosemary back? When was the last time he squirted snail begone around the flower beds? I quickly walked down to the garden shed looking for pesticides and weed killer, as if the amount left in the bottle, the expiration date, anything would give me some idea of what was happening in my life. And then I put the bottle down. I had the sense someone was watching me and laughing. I went back in the house, this time to call a lawyer. But as I started to dial, I became confused. I put the receiver down. What could I say? What did I want from divorce when I never knew what I had wanted from marriage? The next morning, I was still thinking about my marriage, 15 years of living in Ted's shadow. I lay in bed, my eyes squeezed shut, unable to make the simplest decisions. I stayed in bed for 3 days, getting up only to go to the bathroom or to heat up another can of chicken noodle soup. But mostly I slept. I took the sleeping pills Ted had left behind in the medicine cabinet, and for the first time I can recall, I had no dreams. All I could remember was falling smoothly into a dark space with no feeling of dimension or direction. I was the only person in this blackness, and every time I woke up, I took another pill and went back to this place. But on the 4th day, I had a nightmare. In the dark, I couldn't see old Mr. Chow, but he said he would find me, and when he did, he would squish me into the ground. He was sounding a bell, and the louder the bell rang, the closer he was to finding me. I held my breath to keep from screaming, but the bell got louder and louder until I burst awake. It was the phone. It must have rung for an hour non-stop. I picked it up. "Now that you are up, I'm bringing you leftover dishes," said my mother. She sounded as if she could see me now, but the room was dark, the curtains closed tight. "Ma, I can't," I said. "I can't see you now. I'm busy. Too busy for mother? I have an appointment with my psychiatrist. She was quiet for a while. Why do you not speak up for yourself? She finally said in her pained voice. Why can you not talk to your husband? Ma, I said, feeling drained. Please, don't tell me to save my marriage anymore. It's hard enough as it is. I am not telling you to save your marriage, she protested. I only say you should speak up. When I hung up, the phone rang again. It was my psychiatrist's receptionist. I had missed my appointment that morning, as well as 2 days ago. Did I want to reschedule? I said I would look at my schedule and call back. And 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Where have you been? It was Ted. I began to shake. Out, I said. I've been trying to reach you for the last 3 days. I even called the phone company to check the line. And I knew he had done that, not out of any concern for me, but because when he wants something, he gets impatient and irrational about people who make him wait. You know it's been 2 weeks, he said with obvious irritation. 2 weeks? You haven't cashed the check or returned the papers. I wanted to be nice about this, Rose. I can get someone to officially serve the papers, you know. You can? And then without missing a beat, he proceeded to say what he really wanted, which was more despicable than all the terrible things I had imagined. He wanted the papers returned, signed. He wanted the house. He wanted the whole thing to be over as soon as possible, because he wanted to get married again, to someone else. Before I could stop myself, I gasped. You mean you were doing monkey business with someone else? I was so humiliated, I almost started to cry. And then for the first time in months, after being in limbo all that time, everything stopped. All the questions gone. There were no choices. I had an empty feeling, and I felt free, wild. From high inside my head, I could hear someone laughing. What's so funny? Said Ted angrily. Sorry, I said. It's just that... And I was trying hard to stifle my giggles, but one of them escaped through my nose with a snort, which made me laugh more, and then Ted's silence made me laugh even harder. I was still gasping when I tried to begin again in a more even voice. Listen, Ted. Sorry. I think the best thing is for you to come over after work. I didn't know why I said that, but I felt right saying it. There's nothing to talk about, Rose. I know, I said in a voice so calm it surprised even me. I just want to show you something. And don't worry, you'll get your papers. Believe me. I had no plan. I didn't know what I would say to him later. I knew only that I wanted Ted to see me one more time before the divorce. What I ended up showing him was the garden. By the time he arrived, the late afternoon summer fog had already blown in. I had the divorce papers in the pocket of my windbreaker. Ted was shivering in his sports jacket as he surveyed the damage to the garden. What a mess. I heard him mutter to himself, trying to shake his pant leg loose of a blackberry vine that had meandered onto the walkway. And I knew he was calculating how long it would take to get the place back into order. I like it this way, I said, patting the tops of overgrown carrots, their orange heads pushing through the earth as if about to be born. And then I saw the weeds. Some had sprouted in and out of the cracks in the patio. Others had anchored on the side of the house, and even more had found refuge under loose shingles and were on their way to climbing up to the roof. No way to pull them out once they've buried themselves in the masonry. You'd end up pulling the whole building down. Ted was picking up plums from the ground and tossing them over the fence into the neighbor's yard. Where are the papers? He finally said. I handed them to him, and he stuffed them in the inside pocket of his jacket. He faced me, and I saw his eyes. the look I had once mistaken for kindness and protection. "You don't have to move out right away," he said. "I know you want at least a month to find a place." "I've already found a place," I said quickly, because right then I knew where I was going to live. His eyebrows raised in surprise and he smiled for the briefest moment until I said, "Here." "What's that?" he said sharply. His eyebrows were still up, but now there was no smile. I said, "I'm staying here," I announced again. "Who says?" He folded his arms across his chest, squinted his eyes, examining my face as if he knew it would crack at any moment. That expression of his used to terrify me into stammers. Now I felt nothing, no fear, no anger. "I say I'm staying, and my lawyer will too, once we serve you the papers," I said. Ted pulled out the divorce papers and stared at them. His X's were still there. The blanks were still blank. "What do you think you're doing? Exactly what?" he said. And the answer, the one that was important above everything else, ran through my body and fell from my lips. "You can't just pull me out of your life and throw me away." I saw what I wanted. His eyes, confused, then scared. He was huli hutu. The power of my words was that strong. That night, I dreamt I was wandering through the garden. The trees and bushes were covered with mist, and then I spotted old Mr. Chow and my mother off in the distance, their busy movements swirling the fog around them. They were bending over one of the planter boxes. "There she is!" cried my mother. Old Mr. Chow smiled at me and waved. I walked up to my mother and saw that she was hovering over something, as if she were tending a baby. "See?" she said, beaming. "I have just planted them this morning, some for you, some for me." And below the hay mung mung, all along the ground, were weeds already spilling out over the edges, running wild in every direction.